Chapter 5. Getting it wrong. It only took Gib and me a couple of minutes to get back up to our bedrooms. Gib said that he'd take the printouts upstairs with him, and I didn't argue. I went into my room, switched off the light, and got into bed. But I didn't even try to sleep. I knew it would be impossible. How could I sleep when the police might knock at the door at any second? Please, please don't let the police arrive, I prayed into the darkness. I was scared for myself, but I was more terrified about what it might do to Mum. How would she take it if Gib and I were arrested too? I tried to tell myself that it was just my imagination, rushing about at warp speed, but it didn't help. Don't panic, Victoria, I told myself. Think of something else. But what? I waited for something slight and silly to pop into my head, but nothing arrived. Come on, Victoria Gibson, I said sternly. Don't you dare panic. You won't help anyone by panicking. Victoria. Everyone called me Vicky, except Dad and Mrs. Bracken. I preferred Victoria to Vicky. Vicky sounded like something you stuffed up your nose when you had a cold, but I'd never told anyone that. I didn't want people to think I was trying to be grand or something, but I wasn't. But Victoria was such a grand name. Victoria. And I knew why I was called Victoria too. One of my real mum and dad's friends had told the social worker, who had told my current mum and dad. I wasn't called Victoria after Queen Victoria, or even because anyone felt particularly victorious at having me. I was called Victoria because I was almost born there, at Victoria Station. My real mum and dad had just stepped off the Orpington train when my mum started getting labour pains. Some quick-minded person called an ambulance, and Mum only just made it to Westminster Hospital in time to have me. And Victoria was a better name than Westminster. I can't remember my real mum and dad at all. I didn't like admitting that to myself, but it was true. They had gone off for a weekend's holiday, their first holiday since I was born. They were on the last day of their holiday when the accident happened. I was only a few weeks old when they drowned. They were in a hired boat when a sudden squall blew up. They'd left me with friends until they got back, only they never got back. They had died. I hadn't. That made me feel strange, guilty, like somehow Mum and Dad dying was my fault in some way. Like maybe it was somehow wrong for me to live when they died. It was, as Gibbs said, as if they needed to get away from me. I thought about the only photo I had of my real mum and dad. It was taken at their wedding. I put it back in my top drawer, under my socks, and I was that close to taking it out again. I didn't look at it very often. It made me feel very funny and peculiar. It was a good photo though. Mum and Dad were smiling at the camera and they looked so happy. I usually only took it out to look at it when I felt happy too, but earlier I needed to take a look at them. I needed to remember that I had once belonged to people who'd cared about me. They'd wanted me, except for the weekend when they went on holiday. Maybe Mum and Dad had given up all hope of having any children of their own, so they fostered me, practically as soon as my real parents died. Then Mum number 2 discovered that she was 3 months pregnant. They kept me though, and after a year they adopted me. So I am only a few months older than Gib. I'm one of the oldest in my year. Gib's one of the youngest, and he acts it too. My second mum and dad told me I was extra special. Not only have you got 2 sets of parents rather than one, Dad began, but you were chosen by us rather than born to us the way that your brother was, Mum finished. That made me feel good. I was chosen. With Gib, they'd had to take what they were given. Thinking about Gib began to make me feel sad as well as double worried. Even after what he'd said, I still thought of him as my brother. His real name is Richard, but after a couple of years ago, he got everyone to call him Gib. I once asked him what was wrong with Richard. There's no way I'm going to let people call us Ricky and Vicky. Yuck, he told me. Gib looks like Dad. They both have short black hair and the darkest brown eyes I've ever seen. Mum's hair is really peculiar. She calls it Titana red. Dad's always teasing her that it looks more like a milky tea brown to him. She has dark green eyes, the exact same colour as oak tree leaves. As for me, well, I have dark black hair, and dark brown eyes, and good teeth, with only one filling in my entire mouth. I'm proud of that. Gibbs got more metal in his mouth than in the whole of Dad's car. Please don't let the police come for us. The thought sneaked into my head again. Frowning, I turned over to lie on my side. Closing my eyes, I tried to think of only good things. I thought about my teeth. I thought about Mum and Dad and our trip to Scotland last year. I counted all the good things I could remember instead of counting sheep, and it worked. The panicky feeling began to fade. My eyelids felt heavy. I counted many more good things, playing tennis for my school team. The way my friend Gail made me laugh, Mr. Jackson, my English teacher. The next thing I knew, it was morning, and a horribly bright, sunny morning at that. The sort of morning when things should all be all right, instead of all being wrong. After my shower, I went down for breakfast. Mum and Gib were already downstairs. Gib and I exchanged a look of relief before I turned to Mum. No police. We'd got away with it. Mum had on her shoes instead of her slippers, and already had one arm inside of her jacket. I'm off to the court now, she said, to no one in particular. I don't know when I'll be back. I've left £20 on the dining table. Both of you can have a pizza for lunch if I'm not back in time. Can't we come with you, Mum? I asked. A part of me was curious. I'd never been in a courtroom before. But more than that, I wanted to see Dad. I wanted to tell him how Gib and I were trying to help him, and seeing him would reassure me that he was all right. I was already missing him dreadfully. No, dear, Mum replied. Your dad doesn't think a courtroom is the right place for you and Gib, and I agree. Besides, he'll probably be in and out of the court in 10 minutes. You'll see him this evening when he comes home. As I opened my mouth to argue, I felt a sharp pain in my shin. Gib had kicked me under the table. I gave him a filthy look, but I got the message. I shut up. Now where on earth is my taxi? Mum muttered. She sipped at her cup of decaffeinated coffee, then frowned at the kitchen clock. The doorbell rang. Mum put her coffee cup down, then glanced at her watch. Oh, on time for a change, she said, impressed. We followed her out into the hall. Mum opened the door. Sunlight streamed into the hall, despite the two men standing at the door. My heart stopped beating as I recognised the man wearing black jeans and a blue shirt, open at the neck. It was Eric Jones, the systems manager in charge of all the computer operators at Dad's bank. He'd sometimes come round to our house for dinner, and Mum and Dad had been to his 35th birthday party. The other man I didn't recognise. He wore heavy-rimmed glasses and blinked a lot. He had on jeans and a clean red t-shirt. Both of them looked serious, almost stern. I looked at Gib. He looked at me. I held my breath. Hello, Laura, Eric said quietly. This is Patrick, one of my operators. Hello, Eric. Patrick, Mum said, surprised. What brings you here? Eric winced and looked totally uncomfortable. I'm sorry, Laura, but, well, we've got orders to take back your PC. I beg your pardon, Mum said slowly. I could see her lips thinning and her eyes getting hard. We've been told to leave without it. Not to leave without it, Eric said apologetically. And just why would you want to take the PC back? Isn't my husband David innocent until proven guilty? Or have Universal Bank already made up their minds? Mum said angrily. We're just following orders, Eric began, but at the look on Mum's face, he shut up. Why the intense hurry to get the PC back? Mum asked, still fuming. Eric and Patrick looked at each other. I think the bank felt it was advisable, Mrs. Gibson, Patrick said slowly. Oh, what a mistake. Advisable. And just what does this mean? Mum had saddled her high horse and was off at a gallop now. Laura, it's for your own protection in a way, Eric interrupted. You see, last night I was logged on to the system account and someone with a remote PC dialed into the bank's computer. They logged into the test account, which is used by a number of people, and logged off before we could get an IP address. So we have no way of knowing who it was. Luckily for us, they logged onto the development machine rather than the live machine, so no harm was done. And you think it was me? I thought Mum was going to explode. Mum, you're not supposed to be getting upset, remember? Gibbs said, taking the words out of my mouth. Mum took a deep breath, then another. I'll have you know, I barely know how to switch on the wretched thing, much less log on to Universal Computer. And I resent the implication, Mum said. Her voice was steadier now, but icy. No one's accusing you, Laura. Eric raised a hand. You could have fooled me, Mum said. Or maybe you're blaming my children now. Now, go on, confess, Vicky. You got up at 3 o'clock in the morning to break into Universal's computer, and Gib was there helping you. My face was burning. I looked at Gib. We both looked down at our feet. We're both just doing our job, Mrs. Gibson, Patrick said. I'm sorry, but we do have to take the PC back with us, Laura, Eric continued. I tried to argue against it, but the general manager wasn't having any of it. That's why I came here personally, even though I shouldn't have. I didn't want operators you didn't know on the door. We're friends, and I didn't want you to feel that I turned my back on you. I'm doing everything I can from my end to prove that David had nothing to do with the money that appeared in his account. Take the PC then, and be quick about it, Mum ordered. Vicky, show these gentlemen where your dad keeps it. But Mum, they can't take the PC, I protested. I use it for my computing homework. What? You'll just have to do without it, Mum interrupted. I wouldn't keep that thing in my house if Universal Bank begged me. Reluctantly, Gib and I led the way into the living room. I pointed to the PC, then turned away. I couldn't bear to watch. It was like having one of my arms or legs being taken away. Dad hadn't bothered buying one of our own, as the one the bank gave him was more than enough for all of us to use. This was disastrous. How was I supposed to get back onto the bank's computer when I didn't even have a PC to use? And all those listings we printed out, they were absolutely useless. By mistake, I'd logged onto the development system rather than the live system. Like a fool, I'd forgotten that the test account was on the development system, where all the programs were written and tested. Everyone at the bank, except the programmers, had an account on the live machine. The programmers' finished programs were automatically copied across from the development system to the live one, but only when they'd been thoroughly tested by acceptance testers first. The thing was, for the money to be put into Dad's account, it had to be done from the live system, so everything Gib and I had done during the night had been an utter waste of time. And looking at Gib, I knew he realised it too. Patrick carried the printer with the screen on top of it, while Eric put the keyboard on top of the PC processor. Then he saw a storage case that contained Dad's memory sticks and the writable CDs he'd burnt. You can't take those. Dad bought them with his own money, I said. They don't belong to you and your rotten bank, and they've got my homework on. Take your eyes off of them. Vicky, I am sorry. Eric tried to smile at me, but it didn't come off. He looked only slightly less unhappy than I felt. Believe me, I know your dad is innocent of this. I'm doing everything I can, I promise. Yeah, of course you are, Gibb scorned. We can see that. Eric's face flushed a slow red. Just don't touch our private stuff, I said through gritted teeth. Both men looked doubtfully from the discs to me, but it worked. They didn't take them. It was stupid, I know. CDs and memory keys wouldn't be much good without a PC, but all I could think about was that the bank shouldn't be allowed to take everything back. Gib and I followed the men into the hall and watched as they left the house. You go ahead, Patrick. I'll catch up with you, Eric said. We all watched as Patrick walked out to the car, parked in front of our house. I'm sorry, Laura, I really am, Eric said softly, but I want you to know I'm doing all I can to clear David. I'm almost sure he had nothing to do with this business. Well, we know he's innocent for a fact, Gib interjected. Gib? Mum warned. Thanks, Eric. She was still furious. Eric walked out of the house, and Mum, well, she didn't exactly slam the door shut, but she did close it really hard. The doorbell rang almost immediately. If they'd forgotten anything, then tough, Mum mumbled. She opened the door. A tall woman with short hair stood halfway down our garden path. Did someone here order a taxi? The woman asked. Behind her, I could see Eric and Patrick getting into their car. Yes, I did, Mum replied. I'll be right with you. She turned to us. It took her a few seconds to remember how to smile. You two be good. I'll see you later. Be careful, Mum, I said, and send Dad our love. Mum nodded, then left the house. I turned to Gib. I logged on to the wrong system and wasted all that time, and now we don't even have a PC to do it again. Then we'll just have to find another PC to use. And where do we find one? They don't grow on trees, you know. But I was more annoyed with myself than with Gib. I felt like a complete twerp. Well, where do Internet Cafe? He said smugly. They've got loads of PCs, and it costs just £1 or something. Oh, great, I retorted. You want us to hack into a bank's computer using a public PC in a cafe, whilst the police and MI5 and God knows who else monitors what we do? Oh, said Gib, deflated. I left him chewing his lip and went to get my breakfast. But once I'd put the Weetabix in my bowl, I wasn't hungry anymore. Vicky, I've got it. Gib came running into the kitchen. Don't give it to me then, I replied. Puzzled, Gib looked at me. He smiled, then frowned. This is serious, Vicky, he said. I know where there's a PC we can use. I'm listening. Chauncey's got one. Oh, I groaned inwardly. Don't you know anyone else who owns a PC? I asked. Chauncey's is state-of-the-art, Gib answered. I don't want to use Chauncey's PC, I admitted. Why not? Gib asked, surprised. Because I don't like him, I said honesty. Gib looked at me. It's Chauncey's machine or nothing. Unless you know someone else who's got a proper PC that can go on the internet, and someone we trust, I trust, who'll let us go on it as long as we want, no questions asked. I sighed. No, I don't, I replied. Then I don't see how we've got much of a choice, Gib said. I couldn't argue with him. Will he let us use his PC? I asked. I don't see why not. Hang on, I'll phone him and ask. Before I could say another word, Gib was at the phone. I went back into the living room. The table where the PC had been now looked incredibly bare. Although Dad dusted the table regularly, a fine film of dust formed the outline of where the PC and modem had sat. Vicky, where are you? Gib bellowed. I went out into the hall. Gib was no longer on the phone. That was fast, I said, and there's no need to shout. I'm not deaf. Never mind that, Gib dismissed. Chauncey's at home, and he says we can use his PC any time we want to. Are you sure he said we and not you? I asked with suspicion. He definitely said we, Gib said impatiently, adding, mind you, we're probably being a bit previous, asking to use his PC. I bet we don't need to use it. I bet the magistrates throw Dad's case out. Anyone with half an eye could see that Dad wouldn't do such a thing. So what do we do? I asked. We wait for Dad. Excuse me. We wait for Dad to come home first, Gib said slowly. There's no point in doing anything else until he gets back. We have to find out what's going on. He didn't say anything else. He didn't have to. Neither of us wanted to discuss what would happen if Dad didn't come home. Waiting for Mum and Dad to come home was the hardest waiting I'd ever done in my life. Gib and I couldn't find anything much to say to each other. It was as if a high wall had sprung up between us. A wall we couldn't get over, or under, or around. For the first time I felt uncomfortable just being with Gib, and I didn't need my glasses to see that he felt exactly the same way. I spent the rest of the morning wandering around the house, looking for something to do to take my mind off Mum and Dad. The minute hand on my watch had never moved slower. I tried reading a book of science fiction, short stories, but the words kept bouncing off my head rather than sinking in. I took my book and ambled out into the garden. Lunchtime had come and gone, but I wasn't the least bit hungry. I'd been in the garden about 15 minutes when Gib caught up with me. He was still wearing the same faded, grubby jeans he'd worn that morning, but he changed his blue shirt for the t-shirt I picked out with Mum for his last birthday. The t-shirt had a Superman emblem on it. I wondered why he bothered to change it. What was wrong with the shirt he'd been wearing? In his hands he carried the listings, which we'd got from the bank's development system. Vicky, can I go through these batch job reports with you? I just want to make sure I understand them. They're not from the live system, I frowned. The reports from the live system going to be that much different? Gib asked. I thought about it. I don't know. I guess not. The two systems are supposed to be identical so that programs written and tested on the development machine can be run on the live machine. That's what I thought. Gibbs smiled. So we can always treat this as a dress rehearsal, just in case. I thought you wanted to wait until Dad came before doing anything else. I did, but all this waiting around is driving me crazy, Gib replied. So come on, explain what this lot means. Gib plonked the pages of listings down on my laptop. To tell you the truth, I didn't want to talk to Gib. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I wanted to be by myself until Dad came home. If Dad came home. Don't even think such a thing, I thought angrily. Dad will be back today. You just wait and see, Gib said beside me. I was amazed. I turned to him, shading my eyes from the afternoon sun. How did you know what I was thinking? Because it's written all over your face, Gibbs said, looking down at the ground. Why did I get the feeling that he'd changed his mind about what he was really going to say? Gib opened the list. All right then, I said reluctantly. I guess I've got nothing better to do anyway. I'll tell you what each column means and then I'll leave you to it. Gib opened the listings to the first page. Got a pen? I asked. After a quick search through his trouser pockets, Gib pulled out a pencil. Gib's pockets were worse than Mum's handbag. They were always filled with all kinds of junk. I was sure Gib thought of his pockets as the equivalent of Batman's utility belt. Right then, I began, as we pored over the listings together. The first column is the program name. Then, you've got the date and time when the program was created. The date and time when it was compiled to create an object file. Let me see. The next column is the date and time when the object file was linked. Then you've got the user identification of the last person to change the program, followed by... Hang on a minute, Gib complained. I don't write shorthand. I waited for him to catch up. What do you mean the program being compiled and linked? Gib asked, writing furiously. And what's the object file? I sighed. There are 3 steps to running a program on the bank system. First, you have to write it using an editor to produce a source program. Then you have to run a program called a compiler to translate the source program so that the computer can understand it. The file that holds the translation is the object file, and then all the object files have to get linked up together to produce a master program you can run on the system. With me so far? Oh, don't be snotty, Gib ordered. Why not just translate the program and run it? I asked Dad that. He said compiling programs takes ages, and if you did that, all the code would have to be in one file. The system at the bank must have millions and millions of lines of code, and if you only wanted to change one line or one small thing, you'd have to compile the whole lot again. So, the programs are split into manageable chunks for different teams to work on, and then each bit can be changed and translated separately. And then, I've lost my page there. And then you can just link the whole lot together at the end. Oh, I think that's right. Oh, I see. Hello, Gib. Hello, Vicky. It was Mum. I jumped up, listings on my lap, falling onto the grass. I looked past Mum eagerly, but I couldn't see Dad. Where was he?